Welcome to another episode of BIGA Solutions, where we discuss the nexus of biomimicry, indigenous genius, and ethical artificial intelligence. BIGA is an acronym, B standing for biomimicry or innovation inspired by nature, IG, indigenous genius, and A, artificial intelligence. But not just any artificial intelligence, ethical artificial intelligence. Today I'm in a country which is discussing a possible coalition agreement because none of the political parties that were contesting the elections that were just concluded managed to get an outright majority. It means that now all the political parties have to figure out possible partners that they can form a coalition with in order to form a government. So essentially what is required is that whichever coalition is able to get at least 50% plus one of the seats that are available is able to then form a coalition. And this means it will form the executive that will then lead the nation and pretty much take all the key positions to manage the country. So why is this an issue? Well, I've just written a book on how coalitions can actually be designed or implemented, taking inspiration from nature. The book is called Nature-Inspired Coalition Agreement, a Biomimicry Blueprint for Collaborative Governance. But it's not that I want to talk about the book today, it's just that the topic is something that I find fascinating. So let's start first with how governance was managed using indigenous approaches. Pretty much in every continent in the past, we had monarchs. These are leaders who were born into leadership, or rather leadership thrust upon them. So you had to have the right lineage, the right bloodline to be a king or a queen. And obviously this came with its own advantages and disadvantages. One of the biggest disadvantages is obviously, what if the king or queen have only maybe one child or two and none of them really are qualified or capable of leading, so they have leadership thrust upon them. Another way you could argue, well, they grew up in the royal family and therefore they able to master or they acquire the leadership qualities. But some people will argue, is leadership something that you are born with, or is it something that can be nurtured until you become a good leader? So that's not the topic of today. Today we're discussing the coalition agreements and how we can get inspiration looking at ethical artificial intelligence, indigenous genius, and also looking at biomimicry. So traditionally, I grew up in nature, as some of you know, until I hit my teens. Then I went to the big city. But one thing I can tell you is that when I grew up in the village, we had different governance systems. There was the chief, and the chief had advisors that helped to get cases. It could have been cases of disagreements in the community, or it could be forward planning on what the community wanted to do about a particular development issue. And then the leadership would make a collective, of course, the chief would often sit and listen to the arguments and then speak last and maybe sometimes request time to think and come up with a solution. Or sometimes if it was a simple matter, a decision would be made there and then. Now, was this a fair system? Perhaps. But what I can tell you is the chief where I grew up and most of the chiefs in my village, they did listen to the advisors. But not just the advisors, they listened to the community themselves. So the community members had direct access and made direct input to the decision-making process. So you could argue in a way that these forms of governance were more accessible to the people than you have now with the politicians who are elected. But once they're elected, they make all the decisions on behalf of the people, with sometimes hardly any communication, but sometimes they go back and consult. Now, let's look at how else people were put into positions of leadership. It wasn't always about the lineage or having the right bloodline. Sometimes you showed your own prowess in begging, or sometimes you were a traditional herbal healer, in which case you were taught how to heal people using different herbs. And sometimes you were not taught. It came to you through a vision. You could have been sleeping, you could have been sitting, and the vision comes to you that take this plant and mix it with that plant or this herb, and then give it to the patient, and it will cure this ailment. So there were many of these. And then those kind of people were respected in the community. They didn't have to be voted for. They demonstrated through their expertise that they were leaders in that particular aspect. We even had people who would go and do rain dances, dance until the rain comes. I know you may not believe that, but the community where I grew, they did believe that certain people had actually the ability to dance in a particular way, especially if there's a drought until the rain comes down. You could argue. I remember a funny story where some rain dancers in modern times tried to do it. Only a young girl carried an umbrella because the rest of the people who went for that rain dance didn't actually believe the rain would actually come. But a young girl carried an umbrella. And the story goes that when the rain came, she was the only one who was able to stay dry. But just an anecdote. So before we even go to biomimicry, let's talk about one of the biggest challenges that we have now with this current form of democratic coalition agreement in many parts of the country. You have a situation where the winning coalition, that is the first to go past 50%, then take over and run the country. And that leaves, say, the other 49% of the elected politicians or leaders in the opposition benches pretty much. And think about it. It's like listening to an orchestra where only 51% of the musicians are playing. The other 49% are just waiting for a faulty note so that they can pounce and complain that you didn't play it correctly. That for me is not productive. What if we actually had the entire 100% cohort of our elected politicians fully functional, not just sitting there and saying we're in the opposition benches? I know when I say this, some of you will immediately say, but if all the 100 elected politicians are working together, who is going to watch who? Well, fundamentally, that is a wrong arrangement altogether, to expect politicians to be the ones watching over each other. It is the electorate that elected these people that should be deciding whether they're doing a good job or not. You will say there will be collective malfeasance. They will gang up and loot the country together. No, it depends again on the rules that you have put in place. Think about it. Let's say we had a competition where we say we are going to have a competition amongst people to see who gets to the summit of the mountain first. And the person who gets to the summit of the mountain first will get the grand prize. What do you think will happen? That reward system means that everybody is going to try to outmaneuver, outsmart everybody so that they are first on the summit of the mountain. When you are going up that mountain, even if you see someone who is injured or someone who has collapsed, you're not going to help them. You just leave them, look at them, and go past and find a way. You might even use them as your stepping stone to go to the summit of the mountain. But think about it. What if you now change the rules and say, you as a group are going to race to the summit of the mountain within an hour. If all of you get to the summit of the mountain within a predefined time, what do you think will happen there? Teamwork becomes imperative immediately, because now the strong will be even carrying the weak to make sure the entire group gets to the summit of the mountain as quickly as possible. So we need to change the rules. It's not the politicians that are a problem. It is our reward systems that are a problem. And so where do we get something that is ideal to use? That's where now biomimicry comes in. Let's go to nature. So in nature, we're going to look at ecosystems. In an ecosystem, we have got different organisms there. You have the big, small, and those that are called ecosystem engineers, which have disproportionate impact compared to their number or their size. An example is a beaver. A beaver makes dams in the forest there, and it will then capture water, make a dam. And once the dam is there, the rest of the organisms feed near the dam because with lush grass, they drink in the dam, and the birds come now, and other organisms come. it becomes a thriving ecosystem, thanks to the beaver, which is your ecosystem engineer. But there are other organisms as well. I know in most of our folk tales, we believe that the lion is the king of the jungle. But, well, is it really? So the lion may be the so-called king of the jungle, but it is also vulnerable. The cubs of the lion can be easily taken by your jackals, by the hyenas, if it is not careful. It could go out and hunt and hide them somewhere under branches or under shrubs. And whilst it's gone, the cubs can be taken. So it has to look for food, but at the same time, it needs to guard the cubs. So just because you are the apex predator doesn't mean you are safe. In any case, also, let's look at the feeding arrangement. Unlike us humans that are often accused of corruption, over consuming resources, in an ecosystem, all the animals are playing their part for the collective good and growth and success and development of the entire ecosystem. If you become unreasonable in a natural ecosystem, the other members will eject you. Think of a lion. If it were just to go hunting every day and still bringing down 10 impalas every day just for the fun of it, what do you think will happen? Pretty soon the lion will have nothing to feed on because it will have overconsumed its food supply. So a lion, yes, they may gang up together and kill an impala, eat, and maybe not even finish it, but that is not going to work. The vultures are on standby to take over. Whatever the lion has left over, the vultures will eat, and whatever the vultures have not finished, the dung beetles and other organisms will then start their recycling process. Some of the remains will be taken underground and be recycled into nutrients that go back into the food chain. Now, what has this got to do with governance, you may ask? It means that in an ecosystem, resources are managed in an efficient way. Just like as our politicians manage resources on our behalf, the electorate. And then you say, all right, I see where you're going with this. What about artificial intelligence? Where does it come into all this? So in the past, there was no mechanism to track pretty much all the resources that had been expended. We have monitoring and evaluation systems and people doing the work, trying to keep track of the expenditure, trying to think about planning, but it was difficult for the politicians to always go down to the electorate and consult them about everything. So they tended to make decisions on their behalf because the belief was, we elected you, we believe in you, you're going to make the right decisions for us. But now with ethical artificial intelligence, we now have the tools. We can deploy these tools to immediately ask the electorate what they want. Let's say, for instance, we have limited resources and we have the choice of either building a school or building a clinic. And then we can deploy these AI tools through social media and other platforms that can be purely designed for this kind of work to then get a conversation going within a short space of time with our electorate. And they can tell us, no, actually, you guys are thinking of buying a school. The priority for us right now is actually a clinic. We can deal with the school later. Or just hold on the clinic. We can access medical services through these alternative arrangements. So just build us a school. That's our priority right now. So that way you have an interface in the electorate and the politicians who are representing them. Even on other political parties themselves, people will argue and say, but why would people who have different manifestos, different ideologies work together? Now, this is where you have to think about it. In an ecosystem of mutualisms, which is an advanced form of symbiosis. You know, symbiosis is like interdependence, where I depend on you, you depend on me. But mutualism means we both win. It's a win-win situation. I'll give you just one example. Let's say you've got a party that says, for us, we care about stewardship, environmental practices. And then another party says, no, for us, the most priority thing we want is industrial development. And then in nature, if you use the nature principles that are in the book that I've just written, you will see how these can actually be united in a way, or you can see a way that these can be fused together in a win-win situation. Let's say the industrialists are saying, let's build a rapid transit transport system. We want our people in the city to move efficiently, so we need to industrialize our transport system. And then we have the environmentalists saying, no, guys, if we do that, we're going to increase our carbon footprint. We'll have pollution with all these trucks and buses moving in cars. And then a compromise might be to say, all right, why don't we then come up with a transport system that electric energy, electric vehicles, for instance, or let's put a recharging station that people can use electric vehicles. They just swap batteries, or they have rapid charging stations. So you see, you're beginning now to converge. You're still going to have your transport system developed, but now you are also going to meet the requirements of the people who are concerned wanting to reduce the carbon footprint. So all these conversations, you'll find them in my book, but the key thing I want you to take away from this is that in nature, ecosystems are efficient in managing and distributing resources for the collective benefit of every member of that ecosystem. And it is this model that I'm advocating for, in terms of saying that our coalition is functioning. It's not just a coalition of the first winners past the 50%. No, it's a coalition of everybody, where there is rotation leadership. Obviously, it's equitable based on how you were elected. Think of a situation maybe where there's a party that got 9% of the vote, or the coalition that is 90%, and there's another one with 10%, but they come together to form 100%. It means that when they do these leadership rotations, they are going to consider the will of the electorate. They are not to divert or neutralize the will of what the electorate wanted. So the aspects that the different parties used in their manifestos when they were campaigning, those aspects are still respected in the big sort of 100% coalition arrangement. There are accountability measures built into it. There are transparency measures built into it. And it's not just politicians who are taking care of each other or watching over each other. The electorate has a direct role in deciding whether that coalition is functioning and if that coalition should actually come down. So the coalition exists and falls as one. So as we conclude today's episode, I invite you to buy my book. You can buy it as an ebook and use any of the popular e-readers to read it, like Kindle. But you can also buy the paperback, and it's very affordable. The ebook, you can get it for the cost of a coffee latte. And the paperback, you can get it the price of a hamburger meal. Well, if you don't eat hamburgers and take coffee, don't worry. I'm just using this as an analogy. But go to Amazon and get yourself a copy. I would really appreciate if you can leave me a rating there. Hopefully, I'll get 5 stars from you. That will help me with the algorithm to recognize and get this book to as many people as possible. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. And until then, remember, go bigger, go bigger, go bigger.
Scan the barcode with your mobile phone and follow the link or buy at Amazon by searching for the book title or the name of the author. Happy reading.